Hi, I'm Linda Mahalik, and I'm proud to be a Sword Select athlete for 2018. I first discovered Sword at a local half marathon back in 2014, and I've absolutely loved it ever since. As a marathon runner, MMA fighter, and motorcycle racer, I have found Sword to be my go-to choice for fueling in many different sports. If you want to learn more about the endurance drink that fuels me, visit www.drinksword.com and don't forget to use the discount code HeartlandRunner for 20% savings.
Welcome to the Heartland Running Podcast. Join Crystal, Andy, and Chandler as they explore all things running related in the Heartland and beyond.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Heartland Running Podcast. I'm Crystal.
I'm Andy.
And Chandler is off again for the night, but I would just want to say he hasn't been here for the past couple episodes, but he has been working very hard behind the scenes, so we still appreciate very much everything that he is doing.
He's always working.
He is. So, I don't know. At least that's what he's telling me, so I'm buying it.
Yep.
Tonight, our guest is Amy Napoli. I said that correctly, did I? All right, good. I'm getting the nod. And I'm not going to do a whole big intro like we normally do for our guest tonight, just because she has a very fascinating story, and I kind of want to unravel it as we go along. Like a lot of us, she has what I like to call adult onset running. So didn't grow up a runner, didn't do it in college, picked it up, as an adult. And a lot of times for most of us, when we do that, it has to do with a health issue or something else like that, and it becomes a real life-changing event. And Amy's no exception to that, but hers is very much a different twist. So I'm kind of excited to talk to her tonight. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
You were excited that you could be here. So you were not a runner growing up, is that correct?
That is correct. I was a softball player in high school and kind of did all the normal running around that, smaller children do, but running was nowhere near in my wheelhouse. I would run maybe the mile in high school, maybe not so gracefully, and maybe being a little sick at the end of the mile sometimes, but that was the extent of running.
Yeah, I think we all fit into that category here. That was back when running was a punishment, not a blessing. So
for sure.
And so kind of tell us, like I said, it had to do with a health issue, but not in the way that most of us would think. So kind of tune us into how you got started running.
Sure. So to your point, most of us jump into running because it's something that has to do with our own health. And so for myself, the reason we got into running was 13 years ago, my sister's oldest son, Danny, was diagnosed with Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy. And currently he's 15 years old. And Duchenne is the most common fatal genetic disorder that afflicts boys in their early childhood. It is a progressive degenerative disease that slowly robs the muscles of their ability to work, and that includes the heart and the lung muscles as well. So that was what got us into it in the first place.
That is just, I can't even imagine having to deal with that. So they got the diagnosis when he was 2 then, is that correct?
Yeah. Yep. He was almost 3. I guess he was almost 3 at that point in time because he'll be 16 in a couple months at this point.
So you weren't running at all. Your family gets this diagnosis of your nephew, and what did you guys decide to do?
So it clearly changed the trajectory of our family. I'm very close with my sister's family. We live all of about 10 minutes apart. And at that point in time, her 2 children, at that point she now has 3, but my 2 children were all born within 6 months of each other. So there were babies all running around us. And so we sat for several weeks kind of in this utter despair, not knowing what to do, not knowing what did this diagnosis mean, not knowing how much time, just not knowing a lot. And so my sister came to my husband and I and said, would you run the Disney World Half Marathon? And would you run in order to raise money for research for an organization called Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy? And so, of course, we said yes.
Okay, so that's a big step. So, I mean, had you ever run before that?
Again, no, just the mile in high school. And I laugh because all these years later, we did. We laced up and we went to that race, and we, printed up offline the training plan that we thought we should do. And we maybe ran at most 4 miles before that race.
Wait, what? Your longest run was 4 miles? Is that what you just said?
Yes. So
awesome.
We just sort of thought we're not that old. We could totally do this. Our body's not realizing we weren't 18 anymore and could just bounce back. And so it was pretty ugly that first race, I have to say.
What was it like whenever, you first decided that, okay, yes, we're going to do this. I'm going to do this half marathon and stare it right in the face. I mean, what was that feeling like before you even started training?
So I think because family is, always will be so important to us, it didn't matter what the hurdle was that was in front of us. I think because we were naive and didn't know what does 13.1 look like, we had no idea what was going to happen to our bodies at that point in time. We didn't respect the distance. We didn't know the time commitment that should really go into it. So I think we just thought we were just going to go do what we had to do for our family. I don't think we really thought anything about the whole physicality of what we were getting ready to do.
Okay, so I'm sure it was like really, really, really tough. And, there's a lot of people who are listening right now that have probably done a race that they weren't quite prepared for. But what was it like when you crossed that finish line?
So I always seem to have the same reaction when I cross a finish line, and especially if it's a race that I run for Danny. And that just was just utter tears, partly because it was so painful, partly because we did it. We raised the money that year. We did what we set out to do. And now when was the next race that we were going to raise more money for and run again?
Yeah, that's awesome. Were your kids able to go to that first race?
So the first year, so my children now are 15 and 13, and that first year they were all littles. And so we were fortunate that grandparents came and aunts came and were able to take over and have them with them because the logistics in Disney are that you step off at 5 something in the morning. And so they were asleep. They weren't even there that morning. They just knew they were going to play with Mickey Mouse and have fun.
Oh, so. That's awesome.
You did it that first year. How many times have you done the Disney half marathon?
Well, so this past January, so last month, was our 12th year participating. And so we've gradually increased from halves to fulls to goofies. And this January was our 5th Dopey, which is the 5K on Thursday, the 10K on Friday, the half marathon on Saturday, and the full marathon on Sunday, which is 48.6 miles over those 4 days. And this year I actually had, along with my husband, the privilege to push my nephew in the 5 and the half. So that was an exciting experience to have with him.
That's amazing. At one point, I know reading some of your stuff, at what point did he move to a wheelchair?
So he had his first heart attack and was wheelchair bound at 8.
Wow.
Yeah. And
how many races then has he come to since he's been in the wheelchair? Does he go to all of them, or does it kind of?
Yep, he's there because of the early hours. Sleep for all of us, especially when someone is ill, is so crucial in repairing them and keeping them healthy and all of those components that go into it. So those 4 days in a row is a big deal to have him up that early. And my sister and brother-in-law are very strategic about, what time does he get up? What time does he go to sleep? And so he doesn't always see us in every race, but they make every effort to have him there. So yeah, but he's been down there all 12 years. They hop in a car and they drive down and they're down there. So it's great.
That's awesome. What was the name of the charity again?
We run for, our team is Team Danny, and we run for Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy. So it's PPMD for short.
PPMD. And then there's a website for them, I'm assuming?
For sure. I can get you that information.
Perfect. And we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. That is so cool. So tell me a little bit about the logistics of doing the Dopey? I've heard it's a lot. I mean, just the logistics itself.
Yeah, it is. I think so. A couple of things that go into it. When we first really committed to get on board and actually train and hired a running coach and really respected the miles and listened to what our bodies were saying at that point in time. We also, again, had small children when we sort of made this decision. And my husband travels every week. So he'll be in Atlanta running, or he'll be in, Maryland running, and fitting it in becomes not only a battle of who's putting their sneakers on at 5 a.m. when the kids were so little. Now they run with us, and I should say they run in front of me, and I don't see anybody. But it really became, how do you fit all of those miles in? And so in the beginning, when we ran Dopey, we would have to run, the mileage during the week, which would be anywhere from, say 5 to 7 miles per run. And then on the weekend, you would do half the distance on Saturday, and then whatever your training distance was on Sunday. And so it's exhausting. It is very time consuming. It occurs at the most inopportune time of the year because the race is the first or second week of January always. So Christmas sort of comes, and we have to be extremely intentional that we are locking into what is priority in that month, be it family or running, and making sure that those are the things that fit in, and the rest of the noise has to wait until January 15th.
Wow.
So I would love to hear a little bit more about your charity and your fundraising. Mm-hmm. I think that maybe we've got a lot of listeners out here that, they've run a lot, and maybe they have a certain charity that's close to their heart that they might want to, eventually move into to where they can start raising some money. And so how does that work with you on raising money for your fundraiser?
So, like I said, in the beginning, it was just my sister, myself, my husband, and my sister's husband. And so it was the four of us. And my husband is our team captain because he's the guy who sends out all the emails and keeps the team on track. And so over the past 12 years, our team we're just at about approximately $450,000. And
wow.
So that came from a lot of being persistent with our letters. We are very honest with the people on our email list about where we are as a family, where my nephew is in his journey, where research is at that point in time. So people optically see what is the reality of what's going on. Our team has grown, and so we've had to get a little creative because it's hard when you are raising money in a fundraiser to tap into the same well every year. And if you do the math in there, 2008 happened somewhere in there, and of that we've been raising money, and so that was a very big deal for people had to really watch finances, and people still do. And so we completely respect and admire when somebody does give of their own personal money. So we thought of ways that we could start to incorporate fundraising. So we do a spaghetti dinner in conjunction with another organization at Rutgers University. And then we will do tricky trays, which is where the baskets get donated and people, can put their tickets in and things like that. So, and several of my sister's family, friends have done, dinners and things like that in order to raise money. So every year we do something a little different, and it has sort of grown from there.
Yeah, I mean, that is an amazing amount of money. Congratulations on, being able to do that, because that just blows me away. But, let's say someone that is just running races and it's just like, I've got a passion for something. Where does that person start? I mean, they've never raised any money. They don't have a team or anything like that. Where do they start if they want to bless something that needs help?
So I would say the way that we found PPMD, ironically, was shortly after Danny was diagnosed, my sister and I had gone to a local fair, and we had taken the kids to get something to eat. And I saw the name above I think it was the pizza tent at that point in time. And I'm like, look, that's the organization. That's who does research for what Danny has. And it was too early. It was too early for us, for her to be part of that. And ultimately, when she did reach out to them, they became like family to her, and they are some of the most amazing people. But somebody who's just getting into it, I would find the thing that, does it inspire you? Because if it inspires you, you're going to put your sneakers on and you're going to go, if it's running that you're doing. And then I would reach out to an organization and find out, do they have a charity team? Some organizations do, some don't, but would love to have somebody that would run for them and be able to donate money to their organization. So most of the time, it's just as simple as sending an email and asking the question.
Your team started off just as kind of your core family. How big is it now?
So I think this year when we were down there, I want to say we were about 30 people.
Wow.
So we grew. Multiple family members have jumped in. And then over the course of running in town, we've sort of picked up friends who had never run before either and know my sister's family. And so they've jumped in and their children have jumped in. And it's fun to see it sort of move on, and grow a little bigger and bigger.
And I think that's really cool. The fact that not only is your team growing, the fact that you're bringing in other people who are non-runners and, getting them into this lifestyle and stuff, that's really cool. For whatever reason, in my head, I almost assumed that it was people who were already runners and kind of found out about you and came in that way instead of knowing you and then turning into runners.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just quickly scrolling through my head of the people on our team. I don't think we have one person who at the start was a runner. And so It's been super fun to now be on the back, we're on the back end of it because we started it, to be able to coach somebody through like, okay, this is what it's going to feel like on day 4, or this is what you're going to need to do when you're down there, or these are the things that become important during training to pay attention to that we were either not aware of or kind of didn't respect in the beginning.
Now, does most everyone do the Dopey, or do you have like people who do various different distances?
So we have various different distances. This year was our biggest kind of participatory sign up, I think, because a lot of our kids were old enough now to do multiple races of multiple distances. So it's any combination of just, not just, but doing a 5 to doing the whole thing.
I think it's really important for people to understand that, you don't have to run the super long miles to be able to raise lots of money and do lots of good things. I mean, someone who is even doing a 5K, and I'm not going to say just a 5K, because for some people that's just a mountainous, thing to achieve. But any distance can be something that someone can raise money for, because, it's just as inspirational for someone to finish a 5K whenever it's something new to them, or as it is for a marathon, as it is for a Dopey challenge. And so as long as someone's out there and they've got the passion, then amazing things can happen.
Absolutely. I agree. And that's where I think if somebody really wanted to get into it, don't let that you've never done it hinder you, or don't let a distance necessarily scare you. Do the training and go from there.
What an amazing ripple effect, though, too. It starts with kind of Danny right in the core. And then, you're originally doing this for him and these other people. I'm sure you've impacted all these other people's lives to going from, being sedentary to going out and running these amazing races. That has to be rewarding as well.
It is. It's a lot of fun to watch. I think that the best things about ourselves come from when we take care of ourselves. And I think when something motivates us to get moving or to nutritionally take care of ourselves, that's only a win for everyone. One of the, as we were meeting people in town and our kids were getting a little older, one of the things that we had started in town, we didn't have a running program for our kids. There wasn't something for them to join. And sometimes they just want to be with other kids doing the things that they love. So I had started for our daughter Girls on the Run chapter in town. And that was so much fun because it's not just about a race. Yes, they end with a 5K race, but it's so much more important because it teaches them self-worth and self-esteem and respect for others and, how to problem solve and things like that. And so that was really sort of my jumping point into the community as something formal. And then from there, I'm now one of the middle school cross country coaches, which is where my passion really lies right there. So it's a lot of fun.
That is so cool. See, it's like this little piece and then it just it keeps expanding and expanding. I didn't know about that you had brought Girls on the Run to your area. Most people have heard of Girls on the Run, but may not completely know what it is. You described it a little bit, but can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, I haven't heard about it. I would love to hear about that.
And so I think it kind of depends on where you live. In Cincinnati, we have a little bit of a bigger community, and I know there's some chapters here. But if you can explain for those who don't maybe have it in their area.
Yeah. So what it is it's set up that I think if I remember correctly, it probably was about 10 weeks, and the girls are training to finish the season, running or walking a 5K. But we're very clear with them and their parents that it's not about finishing the 5K. It's not that you're going to run a whole 5K, because some people come in thinking, oh, this is a running thing. But really what it is there's a lesson every time that you meet together. And it is, think about an example of a lesson is think about when we say something and it comes out of our mouth, you can't put it back in. But then to tell a 3rd through a 5th grader that they don't understand that. So we use the example of a toothpaste container. You squeeze the toothpaste out, it's out. You can't put it back in. And then they realize those two pieces come together. So when they're able to take these lessons and learn how to live with each other and how to take care of themselves and how to value themselves. And then they finish this race, whether they've walked or ran it, and they feel that success, it gives them the absolute knowledge that they know that there's nothing that they can't do that they don't put the work into or that they don't try to do. And really of their own accord is when that happens.
It's amazing the life lessons that you can just get from that. I mean, just the ability to start something and stick with it and finish it. And then that ability to, work with others, and then the camaraderie of, of starting something, struggling and finishing. I mean, I think that's amazing for youth, whether it be boys, girls, whatever. I mean, even adults. I mean, it's a great thing. So yeah, that's awesome. I
agree.
That is so cool. So again, you go from running's a punishment to coaching. It's so awesome. And then so running and you realize kind of some of the nutritional stuff and some of the other stuff that goes along with it. So now there's another way that running has really impacted your life, and you started almost a whole new career of it. And tell us a bit about that start of that chapter.
I did. So my original career for 20 plus years is I'm a dental hygienist. And so when I had our children, I didn't go back to work full time. And so as children do, they grow up and they go to school full time. And my husband travels every week. And so I had time on my hands to really reflect on where I was as a mom and where I was going. We are on the back quarter of having children in our house. And I knew at some point they were going to go on to do the things that they should do. And so I wanted to go on and do something that inspired me. And where would I be when they left? And so I knew at that point in time, when they were little, we made some substantial changes about when we started running in nutrition in our house, taking a whole food approach, getting rid of processed foods, things like that. And so I knew that was one of the things that sort of lit me up, that I'd love to learn about everything that I could find. And so I went to school, became a health coach, and now I'm a health and wellness coach and owner of Balanced Healthy Self. And so where my business has transcended to, 4 years later, 5 years later, is I work with moms who are so busy taking care of everyone else, they forget to take care of themselves. And so we work through nutrition and self-care and prep and planning, and really set up the support and encouragement for them to set up a framework that fits into their already very busy lives. And so that's one component of my business. And then the other component really marries my passions completely together. And that is that I work with teen athletes. And the reason that I chose to do that was, one, because I had my passion for running, and I can understand the rigors of training and things like that. But it became where, as having teens and long distance runners in our house, their coaches are so focused on the strategic ability and what goes on in practice, and how are they going to get them to bring their best performance self to the field. And so they run out of time. There's not a lot of time for those coaches to focus on nutrition or self-care or prep and planning, which seem like big, bold things for teenagers. But when we are able to give them this framework to work inside, and to know that there'll be good days and there'll be bad days, whether it's from training or whether it's from lack of sleep or the pressures that are on kids nowadays that they don't know how to manage and to work through. When I work with them, we go through all of those things and we incorporate it so when they get on that field, they can be on the field. And when they're off, they can take care of themselves, fuel themselves well, and go on from there. And when it works in tandem, when the mom and the athlete can be on the same page.
That is so cool. I've never heard of anything like that. And I feel kind of like you said, that seems to be a really missing piece out there. So often you hear like of runners who go on to college and stuff like that, they fully admit how terribly they ate, took care of themselves, all that other stuff. You also hear, especially with some of the runners at that age, a lot of eating disorders and stuff. Yeah. So that I think that's just the coolest thing.
And then you also mentioned adults too. That I think that there's a big problem with diets in adults that maybe don't have some sort of fitness regimen that they go through. They may just be going through life like most people, and adults some of them just lack the ability to understand what correct eating is, and it's great to hear that you're kind of coaching people in some sort of way to be able to improve that and help that out. And you talked specifically women. And whenever you're saying that, it kind of made me think about guys. It's like, that's kind of just a big vacuum out there of, I think there's a lot of, my friends and some guys out there, and I see the way that, people I work with, that they eat, and I see some pretty poor habits out there. And I think that, we need a lot more of that out there. We need a lot more of those people who are educated in what the proper way to eat is and the proper way to fuel yourself, and having some sort of guidance out there for people, because I think in adults that's why whenever you see people who go through their 30s, they start to gain weight, go through their 40s, they gain a little bit more weight, and then all of a sudden they're in their 50s and they're like, oh wow, I have a problem. and so that's something that could have been solved earlier in their life. And I think that's great that you're doing that for women, and it just makes me think that we need something like that for guys out there.
Well, so I agree with you, Andy. I think that I focused on, particularly for my business, I did work with men in the beginning, and absolutely, I think it's a great thing. And I would never say never. I think my optics are, moms are relatable to me because of where I've come from. But in reference to what
guys are bullheaded. They're tough to make them do something. I get that.
Well, so here's the thing is that I think as I said with kids learning it early, is that whether it's men, whether it's women, we all look for like, oh, bright, shiny thing. There's the it diet. I go on social media, and here's the thing. I'm going to do it. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to revamp everything about my kitchen. I'm all in. You get home from work on Tuesday and your toddler has Sharpie markered the wall. You have your teen in front of your face with a poster who is telling you that it ripped and they need it for tomorrow morning. And your other one walks past you and just is annoyed at the world, and it's your fault. And so you walk into the kitchen and you grab the sleeve of cookies and you're going to eat it. Well, here's the thing. It's not that we didn't know some of the information of what we should do. It's that we didn't address all the other things that are happening. So I think that's what I help coach through, is that, okay, we know that no one diet fits all, and that what works for my body may not work for your body. And so we figure out what works for each individual body. But then we start to delve into, okay, we know your hair on fire on Wednesday because you've hit a wall midweek. How are we going to figure that out? How are we going to get you outside of that so you can get to Friday and not feel like the whole week derailed?
Wow, that's fantastic. Because I know I've been guilty of the it's been stressful. It sucks. I just had Oreos and a glass of wine for dinner.
For sure. For sure. And you know what? Even with all the knowledge we have in the world and all the strategies we have in the world, those days happen.
Yeah. But what I like what you're talking about too is sometimes, there's kind of that snowball effect of, well, I had that, so, I might as well keep going. And it's kind of that self-destructive behavior. And then you're like, well, I'll start over again on Monday. And it sounds like you're kind of able to go in there and help put the brakes on that. So you know what? Stuff like that's going to happen, but let's address it before it spirals out of control.
Absolutely. And I think the hardest thing too is for people to give themselves grace, to know that life's going to get in the way. And I mean, you take my nephew's situation, big stuff in life are going to happen. And so you have a choice, sometimes we just have to stop and say, okay, this is not what I planned. This is not how I wanted to eat today or how I wanted to run today or whatever it was. And all right, it happened. And so it doesn't define me. It doesn't change anything about my self-worth. And I'm going to move on. And the next 10 minutes of what I'm going to choose to do are going to be what point me in my direction of my goals and my passions.
Okay, so you're going to help someone out, and someone is wanting your service. How are you going to set their week up? What does that look like for someone who's wanting to, put together, a good diet, a good health plan, or, what is it that you do, and how do you help them out?
So the first thing to realize is nothing is going to be cookie cutter because we all have different obligations and things like that. Really what I'll do is one component of it is we sit down and we really talk and dive deep into prep and planning. Starting on, I encourage everyone to take a day on the weekend if maybe in the beginning it's 30 minutes because you've never done it before, but look at the week ahead. And I have them look at what's in the schedule that are things that you cannot take out. Things like you have to go to work and we have to feed our families. And those are things that we have to do. And then there's the things that we put in that we'd like to do. And then there's the things that go into the schedule that maybe are just a not now because the schedule is jam-packed this week. And so I need to just wait 2 weeks, or maybe it's a different season of my life that I could do something like that. And so we start to really pick it apart and say, where is it that you're double booked? And do you have plan B for when your plan A falls apart? Because you're double booked right there. And that makes a world of difference for people to be able to look at it and say, you know what, I'm going to be okay. I know I have to drive in 2 different directions. I don't know how we figure out how to do that, but we do. And then I know that I've got dinner in the crock pot and I'm good to go. So I don't have to worry about that part of it. It just takes a little heat off them. And we start to really just pick apart what does their schedule look like for the week.
Yeah. Do you have anything with like grocery shopping? Because I know that I will walk into a grocery store and grab the cart, and then all of a sudden my mind just goes, because, I just, the Oreos, those are easy to throw in the cart, but when it comes to, I know that I want to go down the vegetable aisle. I want to get all this good vegetables and all this stuff right here, but my kids are going to hate it and they're going to hate me for cooking it. And I don't want to get, the garbage that's in the center of the grocery store because that's where they put it all. And so, I mean, do you have any help on that?
Sure. So when I sit down on the weekends, and this is what I have my clients do, is we talk about meal prep and planning as well. And so first we look at, when are you home? I know every Monday night we're at my sister's for family dinner night. We have done that for 3 years. It's in Violet. That's where we're going. Most of the times it means I don't have to cook dinner unless it's my night to bring food. So I can just check that off. Know where you need to be and when, and then decide. Don't reinvent the wheel every single night of the week with this new, this new recipe that you went on Pinterest and you found, because that gets to be overwhelming. Have your go-to meals that yes, your children will eat, yes, are healthy for everybody. Maybe supplement a little bit more of those vegetables that our children turn their noses up at. I'll eat Brussels sprouts. They won't, but it doesn't mean that I won't eat them. It just means that maybe I'll eat them and the broccoli that they're going to have. So it's looking at it a little bit differently that way. So you have your go-to meals, and then you could have your other meals that you can stretch out. So for instance, I did a Facebook Live the other day, and it was everybody was sick in the house with the flu. So I had bought a roasted chicken because that was as far as I could get to think about making dinner. But that roasted chicken made a roasted chicken. It made a pot of soup that was simple to put together. And then it made chicken broth that I was able to then freeze for when I need chicken broth later. So it's just looking at how can I take a meal and make it reach further and further, which financially helps on the long run as well.
Wow, that's really fascinating. So now you talk about doing Facebook Live. How can people find you? So what's your website, Facebook, all that kind of stuff? Because I think it's really interesting that you're doing some of the Facebook Live and some of that stuff. I think a lot of our listeners would like to check that out.
Yeah, so I'm in a couple areas. So I'm on Instagram, which sort of trails my life as running or as being a mom. And I incorporate little tips in there as far as how to be present or how to fit something into your week and all of that. So that's my Instagram account, and that's Balanced Healthy Self. And then on Facebook, my main page is Balanced Healthy Self. And so there's information that's there. But I also have a private Facebook group that's called the Balanced Healthy Self Village. And so all of us that are in it, we call it The Village. But it is compiled of all moms that are in all walks of life who are there to support each other in a non-judgmental space. And so I'll ask a leading question or we'll talk about what is the biggest stressor that's going on, or I'll put recipes on there for people to follow. So it'll give them an idea for the week or encouragement, that kind of stuff. And then I try to jump on once a week with a Facebook Live, and either it runs the gamut of whether we're talking about nutrition or self-care or prep and planning. So I try to mix them all in a month's time.
What type of person follows your Facebook Lives?
So they would be, I would say the women that are in the village there are a handful of runners that are in there. It is predominantly just all moms in every aspect of health and wellness. Some that are just beginning their journey, that just remembering to drink water in a day is a big deal, to those that are just logging miles away, getting to the gym and just kind of tweaking it and figuring out how to manage motherhood and taking care of themselves at the same time.
Great. And so I want to talk a little bit about the other side of it, the coaching with the kids and the health aspects. What are maybe some of the trends and stuff that you're noticing with some of these teen athletes? What ages are you working with?
So it would be from about middle school to college.
Okay.
Trends that I see. Well, okay, so let's take nutrition. So you said it, Andy, walking in, Oreos are easy to pick. They're kids. They want to eat like the fun colored food and things like that. Most of the time, athletes, their abundance, their caloric intake is so much higher than ours are because maybe not somebody who's in the rigors of full-on marathon training, but these kids are going for hours at a time every day. And so they need to be able to fuel themselves with, real food that goes into them. But sometimes they just don't know what to pick. And so they lean on what's the quickest, what's the fastest, kind of most processed thing that would be there. A lot of it starts with, what do we bring into our houses? So we have to make sure that at their fingertips are the choices that they could pick that keep them healthy. And then the other part of it is they are going to look for those fun things. So it becomes a balance there. So that's the nutrition piece that is kind of reprogramming that, yes, you're a kid. Yes, you're going to have these things. But when you're 3 days out from a national swim meet, you really probably don't want to go to the fast food place and have a heavy meal from there. Probably not the wisest. They get it because they might do it and they learn not to do that again. It doesn't feel so good. And then the other trends that I find with teens is I find that they are so connected as far as electronics go and social media goes. And they are so busy throughout school, throughout sports and training and things like that I think there's a lot of things, and this does not just pertain to teens. I think it does pertain to adults as well. But this big fear of missing out. and that when they see something on social media that they're not a part of, that maybe the things that they're doing are getting in the way, or maybe they should be doing something a certain way, whereas they're not able to disconnect from that whole, you're only seeing a snapshot of time. And so it's really kind of working through and retraining that these are not the things that define our self-worth. These are not the things that the path that you're on today doesn't mean, think about it. It's very hard for somebody that goes to college to think that I'm going to go to college and say I'm going to be an engineer, that maybe on year 2 you change your path. And so sometimes it feels a little overwhelming, I think, to teenagers. I know with my own teenagers, to say I don't know something, or to say things might change, and that feels overwhelming. And what do I do with those emotions? And so if they're overwhelmed and feeling all that transcends into whatever sport they're doing, because it sort of clouds their minds. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it certainly does. And just out of curiosity, and I'm not thinking maybe like extreme cases, but do you see some eating disorders?
I have not in my experience. No, maybe that's not. I could see how that could go. That path could be there. I absolutely could. I have not personally had it in one of my clients. So, but you can see how that can become something that could be for control and for, the places that somebody could really get lost into.
And probably likely too, if somebody is a teenager at that age and they are in an eating disorder, they're not likely at this point to reach out for nutritional help, because that's part of what the disorder is. So
sure, absolutely. I would think that they wouldn't want to have somebody, kind of knowing what was going on. But then I guess maybe the flip side could be maybe they would, because they're ready to get help. So you never know. I mean, I guess you always have to be observant that something could be going on.
Absolutely. Good point. So what else do you have planned for you for the rest of the year? You've knocked out Dopey, and I'm sure there's got to be some stuff coming up.
So I don't have anything formal trained right now. This year, I have changed my perspective a little bit, and I've learned over time. So Dopey, as I said, you train 6 days a week, and it's overwhelming and things like that. We don't train to the seriousness and the severity of that anymore, because what we do, especially in Disney, is we just go to have fun. We don't go to PR anymore, which we did in the beginning and was brutal. And now we just truly just go and we stop at every mile marker and take pictures. So Disney is just a fun, great time. And so I'm looking at later this year, I don't know if I've done Chicago before and I loved it. We did New York this past year. I don't know where I have to put something on it, but I've also added in working with a trainer for strength and incorporating yoga. So some of my days are taken up with other activities, but running, I found my sweet spot is really at about 3 to 4 days a week.
Nice. I'm sure we can find you something fun.
You just do it for fun. I mean, sometimes we take things a lot too seriously. I know I'm definitely guilty of that, but it sounds like you're having fun with it, and that's great.
Well, I think that was in the middle there. I think that was what became a little overwhelming, was when we did get a little faster and we could see the numbers kind of chipping away, and it's fun. And I've had one sub-4 marathon by like 1 second, 3:59:59. I was going to leap across that course if I had to. But when you see like that, if you actually train and you could get a little faster, then it can become, you just want more and more. And I realized where I was in my life with raising our children at that point in time, I couldn't be in all the places at once. So something had to give. And I also found for myself that it became a chore on those 6 days. It didn't become, I didn't love it as much as I had when I just backed off just a tiny bit. But that's for me. Some people love to run every day. It just didn't work for me.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be what you want it to be, what makes you happy, what makes you healthy. And, I know that in the past, I've been guilty of too much training to where it stopped being fun, chasing, a time that only mattered to me and didn't matter anywhere else in life. And so, that's kind of the cool thing. And I really like that. And I think that if anyone has a takeaway from this, from, what we've talked about on this podcast is, just find that sweet spot and find what's happy for you, because that's what's important. That's what's important, because it's not necessarily about you, but it's definitely about what makes you happy and what makes your life better and what helps you to, incorporate your happiness into everyone else's life. And so I think for a takeaway from this podcast, I really, really appreciate what you've said. And I think that's great.
Oh, thank you.
That was very well said, Andy. I like that. Well, I think we'll close it out on that. Did you have
That's
any?
one of those, the more you know, the more you grow moments.
I like
that was great.
I like it. Did you have any other questions, Andy?
I think I'm good. I've really enjoyed speaking with you, and I'm very excited about your fundraiser that you have. And I mean, you've raised just a ton of money, and just the way you're doing it with your family and your heart. And I think that's great. And I appreciated hearing your story on this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here as well. And just like to say, keep us updated with Danny. When you have updates, let us know. We will share it out with our group, because I think people will be interested to follow his story and your story as well as it goes along. So, and we'll also make sure to include in the show notes all of the links that we've talked about, how to, get in contact with you, all of that. So thank you so much for being here. We really, really appreciate it. And so as we head out, as always, we want to give a shout out to the Ozark Mountain Daredevils for the use of their music in our show. And we talk about our Facebook group. So we also have a private Facebook group. So if anybody would like to join that, we have a lot of fun in there, a lot of discussions. We often hold contests, those types of things. So you can check us out there. Our website is heartlandrunning.com, and you can get show notes and other goodies over there. We're on Instagram. We're also on Strava. So many places to check us out. And so until next week, I'm Crystal.
I'm Andy.
And run happy, everyone.